Alright, greetings everybody. Welcome to kind of a combined gotcha video. Normally, this is a video that is either a SD Gundam G Generation Eternal video, or it is a WOTV video, but very rarely is it actually both. So today, the reason I want to talk about this is a little bit of the financial state of both of these games. If you're on my channel and wondering about where these games are, let's talk about it today. That's what we're here. So first off, the WOTV section. Let's talk about War of the Visions, because this one, honestly, is probably the more dicey one that people think out there. You know, global side has recently shut down due to what I would assume is basically at this point poor funding, where players are just not spending enough money. They're kind of done with the WOTV team, and therefore, people are kind of just done with it. But the JP side is still going. The JP side is still active, and it doesn't show signs of slowing down. Now, the big thing here to note is that all data out there, if you are one of the people who goes to sensory tower data, which isn't 100% accurate anyway from my understanding, but it's going to be even less accurate for War of the Visions. Now, what I mean by that is, and we will come back to this picture, but they have released a kind, like the guys on Reddit in the Gacha Gaming section have basically made this kind of their monthly, hey look, this is what games have made over the course of the month. And the interesting thing, top 50, there is no Final Fantasy present, which is very interesting. Both Ever Crisis and War of the Visions have dropped completely out of the top 50. And that doesn't particularly bode well for either of these games. Especially, I feel like Ever Crisis is maybe a little bit more on the like scary part, because, you know, it feels a little weird that game has generally been making pretty good money, but maybe with Square Enix being so quiet, maybe with Square Enix canceling games, maybe some people have found a little bit less reason to spend. Now, from what I've seen from sources, the actual amount of money that was pulled by the JP version for the month of May was about 300,000 from like Apple, I think, and like 200 from Android. It wasn't really that impressive, and given that like late April into early May was the Final Fantasy VII collaboration, as well as like anniversary, you kind of would have expected better numbers for WOTV, right? Like it probably should have, it's done in the past previous. Well, first off, let me just say that one of the big reasons is the new web shop. I would assume that there's almost no reason for people not to potentially be interested in the web shop. The web shop has had more bonuses, bonus lapis listed than the in-version app, as well as a few like extra bonus pickup things, like right here. A pickup 10 summoning ticket gift pack for the Reincarnation Festival, or, you know, the general web shop bonus for just going there on the first time. You can get some nice little extra bonuses on there. You don't even need to spend any money. However, if you do spend money, well, you can get some bonuses on the web shop that are not available in the application. There's no reason to not do this if you are actually spending money. So what basically I'm saying is, if you are like out there and you've seen the data and you haven't like taken a second to kind of process some of the things that happened on WOTV JP, yeah, the numbers on the actual sensory tower data don't look that good. But I would assume that, especially for the month of May, a lot of money is being funneled through the web shop. And this is kind of good, because this funding, if like, let's say even half of War of the Visions, which is probably pretty dependable, half of War of the Visions currency that was going to come through Apple and Android has gone through instead through their own web shop, then the web shop has more than earned its keep, because that is not having to pay the Apple or Android fees, which is particularly pretty nice. Also interesting to note that with Garuza's release, or well, his new version release on the web shop, well, that guy has now like a little bit of a bonus where if you spend money on the web shop, you're getting a large chunk of Visior plus 40 shards of him. JP has never had this kind of bonus with a Visior pack before. So they are, I think, like, okay, let me collect myself for a second. The sensory tower data isn't particularly accurate to this. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with Ever Crisis, and honestly, I don't care. I just found it interesting that it too had dropped out of the top 50. But at least for War of the Visions, there is a logical, plausible reason, and it does make it a little bit more difficult to determine whether or not WOTV is doing a ton better. But if there's at least 500,000 in currency coming in through just the regular process, then I would assume that probably the rest is coming in through the web shop, and probably JT is just as profitable. Now, for what that means for the game's health, as far as I'm concerned, is if you're thinking about joining WOTV on the JP side, it's totally fine. In terms of just playing the game for free, I think you can play the game as a free-to-player right now and do particularly pretty well for yourself. You don't need, but really, you don't need to spend money at all. I don't think that, like, if you are a global gamer, like you exist outside of Japan and you want to play the Japanese version because you still enjoy WOTV, I don't think that spending money on the JP version is a wise decision. Not because I think that the game is going to shut down very soon, but I do think that it's just not where you should be spending money, especially after global version has shut down. I don't know. Donate that money to charity, buy a bunch of games on Steam, do whatever you want if that money is burning a hole in your pocket. But spending it on WOTV JP is not what I would do. I don't think the JP side particularly needs it at the moment, and if it does, this was not the correct way to get that. Anyway, so that is basically where I see WOTV JP for our financial health. I think it's still perfectly fine. Content creators are still doing on the JP side, provided that the characters are interesting enough, and Garuza is interesting enough, apparently, as Ichin has returned to do a video on him. But yeah, probably safe to play if you want from an outside perspective, but I would not spend money because, action games is what Square Enix has been doing lately, so yeah. Moving on, let's go back and talk about the other game that I want to talk about, which is G Gundam Eternal. And G Gundam Eternal is doing very well for itself. I didn't think that the Stardust banner was going to be really that much of a hit, but apparently it is, because we have gotten the notification once again that we've hit number 1 in terms of the banner sales, just on like web shops for spending. Here we are, number 1 again. You guys out there are really going to make the next Master League difficult, aren't you? But yeah, 3,000 diamonds for everybody as a celebration for the fact that the game is very, very profitable. And that brings us to talking about where this game is on the Sensory Tower data. So again, we do have this, and if we go down all the way to 50, well, we can see just a bunch of games on there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, Epic 7 still hanging in the top 50 all these years later. Wow. Summoner War, that's one I recognize. Ensemble, Azure Lane, Nikkei, $23 million in the month of May. Oof. Wuthering Waves, $26 million. Fate Grand Order still doing real good. There's SD Gundam. Wait, wasn't there, really quickly, I just want to note this. Like, Uma Muzun is on here, yeah, at like 20th? Like $9 million. Horse Girls, apparently very profitable. But yeah, Love, not as successful as Love in Deep Space or Pokemon Pocket TCG, which are an absurd amount of money per month. Honkai Star Rail, down, but whatever, I guess. I guess when you make 103 million a month, you can do a lot less than that. But SD Gundam, G-Generation Eternal combined, a total of 34 million for the month of May 2025. That is actually incredible. I'm astounded by this because I didn't think that Gundam games would turn out this much money. But apparently, yeah, there is just a ton of money funneling into this game. 34 million, with the previous month being 70 million, up to 34, does tell me that there is a lot of popularity for this game, and that this game's health is extremely strong right now. And to be fair, if they are pulling in $34 million and they are kind of doing new anime related things for Gundam and tying into the new anime and everything, awesome, great. I think that's just fantastic sort of thing. I do think that something that is contributing to this is the recent uptick in actual Gundam things to do. Like right now, G-Quux is still in the middle of its run. When G-Quux ends, I'll be interested to see in the future months whether or not we can keep this kind of pace going. But yeah, when you hear hit #1 on terms of like the storefront sales, that's impressive. That's really good. That sounds like a really positive thing. But now you kind of get an idea that like SD Gundam G-Generation Eternal for a full month placed in the actual top 10 for gacha earnings out there. And that is kind of crazy. What I basically am saying is, if you're on the fence about playing this game, never been a better time to pick it up and start playing. Absolutely fantastic time to start going for this game and playing it. Very healthy. And you don't, I feel at this point, you also don't need to worry about spending money on this game. Easily just free to play it and say, hey, doing fine. So yeah, taking a look at these two games that I play, I find it really interesting to see financially where they both are and how they are going. It'll be harder to do any kind of future look at WOTV with any kind of accuracy because the numbers are kind of very permanently skewed. But SD Gundam is firing on all cylinders, and that makes it good news for us players. Hopefully we're going to see even more celebrations in the future, besides just sales things, but also like more animation projects, more new stuff, and a lot of new content, as I hope that they invest this money properly back into the game to keep this momentum going. Anyway, so that's all for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, Gacha Gaming on Reddit. Thank you so much for making these handy infographics, which are very nice. Shoutouts to you guys. Later.